Hello, everyone. This is Gary Wilson, and welcome to this week's live Path to Prosperity webinar. This is for typically investor agent students. However, some people have taken the programs for flipping, buying rentals, managing rentals, wholesaling, even commercial. Actually, Chris was one of the ones that did the commercial program in the development phase. We have that rolled out on the MLS now. Excuse me, LMS, not MLS. And but Beverly, they haven't built the all the marketing material and things like that go with it. So, but it's out there, and I've seen it. It's already loaded, and I will be making that available here probably the next few months. But in any case, good subject tonight. As I mentioned while we were warming up, I've got Chris and Trisha Latham on, and we're going to share with you some of their life experiences when it comes to owning investor properties. And before I get started, I just remind everyone. Please make sure you get the recording the next day from Beverly and look at the email for any updates. I think she's published or is publishing the webinar schedule for October. And there are any other updates she has to the systems or platforms, other activities we have going on. In fact, I'll tell you one right now, likely in October, Tom Silvestri is going to present Legalshield, which is a product you can get for yourselves and offer to your clients, particularly those that own investment properties. What it is, it's like insurance for legal services. And I have it now, and I got it initially way back in, my gosh, probably the late 90s or early 2000s when it first came out. And it's well worth it. It's like something ridiculous cheap, like $25 a month. You get the call and and they'll write free letters for you whenever you need to, and they'll do a will for you. Other services, if you need to go to court, they'll charge you a discounted rate. So, but just the letters, the phone calls, and the will and all that is worth way more than what you'll be paying for it. But really, it's more about us using this in our network as part of our marketing efforts to attract new clients. So look for an announcement on that. Like I said, we'll probably do it in October. Tom will be leading the charge on that. So thanks, Tom, for doing that. In any case, let me bring up a Word doc here, and let me share that. Whoops. Where's my share? There it is. Okay. And as you have questions, guys, please feel free to chime in, okay? In fact, to tell you what, let's do this, Chris. Since you and Trisha actually put this together, why don't I go ahead and unmute you? Hang on just one. Drive, since it's your document, and I will narrate, or sorry, I'll let you drive, and I will facilitate looking for the chat messages come in. So let me very quickly unmute you. Hang on one second. Hi, Cedra. Good to see you. Long time no see. There he is. There's Chris. Okay, so I'm going to promote you to panelist, Chris. So you should see that coming your way any second now. And I'm going to also going to ask you to start your video. And last but not least, I'm going to unmute you. So Chris, you should be able to turn on your camera and unmute your mic now. Okay.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can. Good to see you, buddy.
Excellent. You too.
Yep. So Chris, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and narrate, and I'm going to man the chat box here because I got a feeling this is going to generate some questions because it's real life experience.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try to go through this quickly. We could spend hours on it. Briefly, we want to sell most all of our single-family rentals. We have 7 now, and we would like to get into either apartment building or self-storage. We think we're at the height of a bubble right now, and next year we'll probably have some sort of a correction. So the reason I got started was because I was in telecom for many years, and we had a lot of layoffs. And back in 2008, it looked like the company was going out of business. So I heard some advertisements for some turnkey companies, and we started buying just, well, we actually started buying 2 small rentals in Phoenix. And after at that time, 2008 to 2011, if you remember that, that was a great time to be buying. We're actually kind of surprised that more people didn't buy at that time, because you could see the prices were plummeting.
Mhm.
So then, sure enough, it was a good thing we did that, kind of fast forwarding. We kept buying properties throughout, from about 2008 to 2011. And sure enough, I got laid off in 2016. Took a little longer than I thought, but I'm glad I had prepared, because my plan B turned into plan A, and without it, I wouldn't have had much of anything. So when I got laid off, I did kind of the usual route of trying to look for a new job. But as it turned out, I had enough income coming in for our rentals to survive without a job. So briefly, the way I got started was by listening to biggerpockets.com. I stopped contributing to my 401k in 2008. I cashed out some stock that the company had given me, and we liquidated our savings and took a big risk and started buying rental properties. The first one we bought was very inexpensive in Arizona, and we bought 2 at once, actually, and one of them was only $60,000. I talked to a neighbor, and they said they had purchased their house for $350,000 in 2007. So in that neighborhood, we purchased the $60,000 house. So that's when I knew we were doing the right thing. However, there was a tenant in place, and in both cases, both of those houses were defaults by the owners. The turnkey company didn't tell me that until after I bought them. So what that means is the people that owned that house defaulted on their payments, and a cash for keys company came along, offered them to actually either move out or stay in and be tenants. So they made them tenants. They set up a property management company. They did a little work on the house, and they turned around and sold them. And it was a good deal despite all of that, but the tenants weren't that great. The management wasn't great. And both of those skipped out on about, well, when it was all done, maybe about $3,000 is what they each owed us. But despite that, we had positive cash flow, and we made a sizable profit on the houses themselves. So losing a little bit of money there in each case turned out to be no big deal, which kind of gives you the idea of how powerful rental houses can be. So on to the next part. I do have better numbering on my next version, but when we were buying, we found out that cash is king. After we sold off the, I'm sorry, let me go back. The first house that we bought that was $60,000, that's when we liquidated our savings. And we bought that along with our stock cash out and the fact that I was saving money on the 401k. We bought that with cash. The second house was $70,000. We didn't have cash for that, but we got a deal on that $60,000 house. We got it for less than they were asking for. I think they were asking somewhere around 68 or something like that. We found that as that process went on and we bought more and more houses, if you pay cash, not only do you get a better deal, but refinancing is cheaper, easier, and faster, and a whole lot less hassle. You would think the banks wouldn't care much, but they do. If you already own the house, then they're a lot more willing to work with you with a refinance. Can I skip down to number 7? That's called BRRRR, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. And that's something that I learned on Bigger Pockets. And you can keep doing that pretty much forever as long as you're willing, as long as you can have positive cash flow. Now, a little bit about the buying process. If you can buy with cash, that's great. If you can't, then you can still do the BRRRR process. You can refinance for a better rate after you buy it. We found that when we're buying the houses, we can negotiate a better price when it comes to the inspection time. And I know some people don't like that, but that's kind of just the way it is. When you're a real estate agent, that happens to us as well. But especially when you're doing an investment property. And the banks, although they're very tough at first, one of our properties was a short sale, another one was a bank owned. They're hard to deal with and they take a very long time. But once you get started and you've made your offer and it's been accepted, it's a lot easier to come down on the price when you find problems. And they
Hey, Chris. Hey, Chris, would you mind if I just want to emphasize two key points in that section before we go on? Is that okay?
Yeah, please jump in.
Okay, cool. A couple things, guys. Chris mentions right up in number 1 in that section. Let me just slide back up here. Cash is king. And I know some of you have been around me for a lot of years, and you know I really do preach that, and it's true. And I didn't start off that way. I started off like most people, borrowing up to my eyeballs. But what I found out was when I got on a cash basis, absolutely you get the better deals. It doesn't mean your cash just sits there. What Chris was talking about, the BRRRR method, buy, remodel, rent, refinance. So let's say you only had enough money to buy one house in cash. You can do that. Increase the value by some minor repairs, raise the rents, make it more valuable. Then go get a refinance it with a new mortgage. That's a first mortgage because there's no mortgage on it right now. Even though you're refinancing, it's still a first mortgage. And it is absolutely always easier to do it that way than to get a mortgage through the purchase. It's just easier. So you pull that money out, you get a loan on the house, they give you that cash back, right? Then you can go buy the next house. So it's not like you have to have $1 million to buy 10 houses. You just have to have enough money to buy one house, and you refinance that by the next one, which has no lien on it. Then you do the same thing, fix it up, raise the rents, refinance it, pull the cash out of there, and do the next one. And that's how you build a nice portfolio. You always leave equity in the properties. You always have cash flow. So Chris, I appreciate you for bringing this up. I just want to emphasize that key thing of how you get on a cash basis and why it's so important. So, okay, back to you. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, yeah. I think we left off on number 4. Don't be surprised by short sales. They take a very, very long time, sometimes 6 months or more. Just stick with it. If it finally hits, then fine. We made, when we were making offers here in California in the desert, we made, I don't know, dozens and dozens of offers. Sometimes we would have 3, 4, or 5 offers out at the same time. I know that's risky, but we always offered low and we waited for a counter offer. Sometimes we got no counter offer at all. Some people just ignored us, which you're not supposed to do, but sometimes our offers were so low that people didn't counter offer back. Our objective was to buy as many rentals as possible. And so you don't want to fall in love with any one particular house. You just want to try and blanket the market and get as many as you can. And in 2008, of course, it was hard to go wrong. Once you find a house and you start the negotiation process, it's very important to run the rental calculators. Gary has some, and Bigger Pockets has them. And don't fudge the numbers in your favor. Run a realistic rental calculator to tell you how much you pay, how much you expect to get, rental increases, and so on. And don't forget to count everything. The rental calculators are good at that. It's not just rent versus house payment. There's insurance, taxes, repairs, all that type of thing. We also found that we flipped a house out in the desert, and we always had more than one exit strategy. We turned out we were going to hold that house, but we put so much money into it. It was a bank-owned property. It had been vacant for 10 years. There were squatters in there. Most of the copper was missing. It was in really bad shape. We got a really good deal on it. They were asking retail for it. Apparently they hadn't seen it in the last 10 years. We got it, I don't know, I think we got it for 80 or 100,000 less than they were asking. And we put 80 or 90 grand into it and sold it for, still made a good profit. But the point is we were thinking about holding it, but we had put so much into it that we were fixed to make a good profit, so we just went and flipped it. Now, in general, this is going to come up later, but capital gains is much better than income tax. I just talked to somebody at one of our houses that said that, oh yeah, they're investors too, but they decided to sell the house before 1 year so they wouldn't have to pay capital gains. And I laughed and I said, well, you realize that means you had to pay income taxes. What's better, income tax or capital gains? So I don't know why people don't know that capital gains is almost always better than income tax. So let's go down to the tenants. Now, you would think after listening to Bigger Pockets and studying for quite a while that I would know better on some of these things. Gary, can you scroll down a little bit?
Yep.
I should have picked better tenants. The inherited tenants were a problem. There wasn't not a whole lot I can do about that. But when I found out that those tenants had defaulted on their payments, they weren't very good on their rent either. And probably the biggest single mistake I made, and the Bigger Pockets guys talk about this all the time, is look for a higher credit score. And that's kind of contradictory, because why would they be renters if they had a high credit score? So you have to be willing to wait a little while until you can find somebody with 720 or above. And the Bigger Pockets guys say that is the single most important thing next to no evictions that you can do. I was also a little lax on checking all the references. I didn't think to ask for more than one past landlord, but realized that if they're a bad tenant, maybe the past landlord will give them a good review just to get rid of them. And it's important to look for inconsistencies when you call their references. We had one person that gave a work location and the name of a supervisor, and we looked up that work location and there was no such person there. Had we called and asked for that person, got them on the phone, and they said, oh yeah, we're Mr. So-and-so. Turns out that wasn't they were lying. So, and we wouldn't have caught that had we not found out that there was nobody there by that name. So talk to them on the phone, talk with their spouses, look for checklists that you can go through on questions to ask, that type of thing. Don't just believe anything that they say. You'd be surprised how people lie on applications. And our policy right from the beginning, one thing we did do right is that any lie on the application disqualifies you, no matter how small that lie is. So just verify everything. We found, believe it or not, that the Zillow rent manager was really good for taking the application. The tenants can fill it out. They pay the fee directly to Zillow. They can use that same application for 30 days on other rental houses. You tell them that, and they don't have to keep paying application fees over and over again. Another mistake we made was we didn't get complete information. We got names of everyone, but we generally got social security number from the primary renter. We should have gotten driver's license copies, phone numbers, email address, ask them, is there going to be anybody else in the house? That type of thing. So any questions on that?
Yeah, couple things. Everybody to write down is when you buy a property that's called turnkey, in other words, there's already tenants in there. What we learned to do is this, is we would always ask for the leases, which is obvious. You want to read through the lease from start to finish. I found a situation one time where their current owner had already collected not just first month's rent and deposit, but also last month's rent, essentially 2 months rent plus deposit. And the way everything was prorated, I wasn't getting that proration given to me at the closing table. Had I not read that lease, I would not have been able to say, wait a minute, you owe me another month's rent. You've already collected last month's rent. If that didn't happen, I wouldn't have been able to collect the rent from the tenants because they had already paid it. The other thing I learned was to get their rent rolls from the current rent roll is a history of their rent payments, when they came in and how much came in and all that. And you want to make it certified. Tell them they need to certify the rent roll, right? And that'll scare people from maybe thinking of pulling the wool over your eyes. And we would also, if we saw patterns like gaps of missed rents or patterns of late payments, we would go to the courthouse and ask for the case history on that property. They'll give it to you. It's public information. You could even say, I've got a sales agreement unless we're closing. It's part of our due diligence if they question, but I never had anybody question. We could just say, plug in the property, and they give you any landlord tenant cases in history. So we would look for patterns and look for history. And then if we saw problem tenants in advance, we would tell the current owner, we want to buy the property, but you've got to evict that tenant or have them lease peaceably before we buy and take possession. So another thing is this is on the applications, you've got current and prior landlord. Sometimes the current landlord will say something. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry to see them go. They've been great. You find out they're the devil, right? So what we did is we would always call the prior, and we would also ask the prior landlord for their application on file from that tenant, and then call that prior landlord. I did this one time, went back like 6 deep because my gut told me something wasn't right, and it turns out she was lying. And the person going back 5 or 6 layers deep is the one that said she's a professional, stay away from her, et cetera, et cetera. Had another person call me, apply, and I called the current landlord, and I could tell right away it didn't sound right, didn't smell right. And so I looked up the property address, found out the real owner from the property tax records, looked them up and called them. Turns out the applicant was obviously lying. And I'll give you a really easy way to tell. On their application, when it says they're paying $1,000 a month, when you call the last landlord, current landlord, say, I see Elizabeth is paying $1,300 a month or something other than what the stated rent was. And if they say, oh yeah, she paid that $1,300 every month faithfully, you know you've got somebody pulling the wool over your eyes. So sorry to take so long. I just want to tell you the things that people will try, to pull the wool over your eyes.
Well, that's great. I wish I'd have known all that at the beginning, but at least we learn our lessons as we go, right?
That's it.
The next big lesson we learned, especially in California, we bought 4 of our rentals in California in the desert, out by the windmills, in an area called Desert Hot Springs. It's considered a Class C, fairly high crime area. We found that Class C areas lead to Class C tenants. 3 of the 4 rental houses had the air conditioning condenser in the backyard ripped off when we bought the house. Before we bought the house, we had to put in new air conditioner. I found that, and this is something that we learned online actually, but we found it to be true. Tenant class is an average of the area and the improvements. That number 4 down there. Don't go cheap on your improvements. It's counterintuitive, but if you put more if you put more into the improvements, you get a better tenant. You can charge a little more for the rent. Some people I've talked to said, look, we're in a Class C area, so we're going to keep the place as trashy as possible, put in the cheapest carpet, and make sure everything is already pretty trash. So when the tenants trash it, it won't be any worse off than it is now. Well, that's not a good idea. If you fix the place up to begin with, ask a little higher price, get a little better tenant. Sounds a little, once you do it, it actually works. And when we're picking out the location, all over the country, this is true, you've got equity versus cash flow. You can't always have both. California is kind of nice in that you can get both. You get equity pretty much no matter where you buy in California, but you don't always get cash flow. If you're going to buy in San Francisco, then you can forget about cash flow. But out in the desert, the prices were cheap. It still had fairly good cash flow, but our rents started out maybe around $1,100 a month. That's not a whole lot for a house. They're up to maybe $1,800 now, which is nice that we already own the houses. But so we've been getting cash flow and equity all along. We found we have some rentals in Idaho. Long distance rentals are a problem. It's harder to check in. We should have checked in more often. We should have done pictures or some kind of Skype walkthroughs or anything like that to be a little more on top of things. Some people say don't buy long distance rentals at all, but you can buy them. You just have to be aware that it's a lot of trouble. You can't really trust what's going on, and you've got to go there and visit at least once every 4 or 5 months, preferably sooner. when you're buying, Gary makes a deal out of this as well. Look at the neighborhood stats, the crime reports, et cetera. Don't buy in a high crime area, even if it is cheap. Looking back on what we did, instead of buying 4 cheap houses here in the desert, we could have bought 2 houses that were twice the price and probably had a little less cash flow, but had considerably better equity and still come out ahead in the long run.
And tenants.
And yeah, and tenants, of course, we would have had better tenants in better neighborhoods. It's important, I alluded to this earlier, but to manage the manager, the property managers that we got through the turnkey, both of them had problems. One of them was doing repairs phantom repairs that weren't actually being done. What I should have checked was, hey, Mr. Tenant, did the property management company actually do this repair? And in some cases, the answer would have been no. So I can't believe that they would do that. We were very naive. And the second property management company went bankrupt and kept our last month's rent plus our deposit. So that's why we lost about $3,000 on that one. Now, one thing I did do right as time went on, we added many addendums to the lease. Always get a real lease, not something that you make up. And you can find those on Bigger Pockets. You can look under the state on leases. If you don't have access in the MLS, just print out, if you're here in California or if you're someplace where you are an agent, just print out an actual lease. If you don't have that, look for a real lease for your state and put in a whole bunch of addendums. Go over every line of the lease with the tenants. Don't just expect them to read it. Some of them read it, just sign it without reading it. And do an automatic increase. This seems to be one of the most common things that I've learned from other landlords is, oh, I got a good tenant, therefore I'm not raising the rent. Well, you really need to raise the rent with everyone, whether they're good tenants or bad. Just raise it a whole lot more with bad tenants. That could be a technique for helping to get them out. You can raise it a whole lot with a bad tenant, but be aware that almost everywhere there are laws that prohibit or limit the amount of rent that you can raise. In California, it's 5%, depending on the county. So just make sure you look it up in advance. I would say, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things, guys. One of the things I really encourage everyone to do is, I'm a broker in multiple states, and I bought in multiple states. So what we learned is really from the judges is always use the state's approved contracts, whether it's a sales agreement or a lease on small rental properties. Big commercial properties, we do a lot of things creatively, but standard lease agreements that are pre-approved, usually all the way to the state Supreme Court level, that means the lease will always be honored and enforced. And then what you do, like Chris was saying, in your addendums is where you add your special language. As long as it doesn't conflict with the main body of the lease, and it doesn't break any federal, state, or local laws, you can do things. You can say you must have your own trash can, and if it's a state that has liberal gun laws, you can say no guns allowed. You can all kinds of things you can put in there, but the main body of the lease is a big deal. Like there's a famous case in Pennsylvania where an appeals court judge, it was a Section 8 case. Owner brought in a Section 8 tenant, evicting them because they didn't pay their portion of the rent and would destroy the property. The landlord won at the magistrate's level. The tenant got free legal services from Neighborhood Legal Services that you and I pay for, by the way. How about that one? And it went to the appeals court, and it got turned over. And what happened is the judge said, I don't recognize this HUD lease from Housing Urban Development because it wasn't a state approved lease. And the owner had to go all the way back to square one and start all over again. And it was a famous case where the lesson was always use your state's forms and then add your special language and addendums. So by the way, when it comes to rent raises, one of the things we look for when we're buying bigger complexes is rates that are below market value, and it tells us the owner was afraid to raise the rates. And we knew there was room for improvement, room for growth, and we would buy properties that had poor management. So instead of doing BRRRR with physical deferred maintenance, we buy properties with bad management and turn them over that way. So, okay, Chris, back to you. Thanks.
Yeah, good stuff. And realize that my talk is geared around single family rentals, but a lot of this could extend to multiplexes, apartments, and that type of thing. I left off on the 3-day notice, and this deals with forgiveness. You'll find that with tenants, they'll have excuses for why the rent can't be in or is late or so on. And you can say something, well, that's fine, but the law requires me to serve a 3-day notice when the rent is late on the 6th day. You can say the rent is due on the 1st, late on the 5th. On the 6th day, I will be serving a 3-day notice, and you need to actually do it. And usually that will bring them around. And, I'm really sorry about your problem. I'm empathizing with you, but I just have to do this to be legal and to be fair to all the other tenants. But never have an adversarial relationship. Be a nice guy, but be firm. Stick to your lease, stick to your policies, send them gifts, be friendly but firm. Spell out everything in advance. Think of every possible scenario having to do with smoking, with extra guests, with dogs, pets, cats, anything that you can think of. One thing, bugaboo we had was water damage and minor repairs. We learned to say in our leases, tenant is responsible for all repairs $50 and under. And so if they have a light bulb that goes out, they won't be calling you to change that light bulb because that certainly costs less than $50. We always started with a 1-year lease. Sometimes we renewed, sometimes we didn't. If you do not renew, in California anyway, it goes to an automatic month-to-month. Month-to-month give both parties a little more flexibility, but after a year, you still need at least 30 days to do just about anything, 60 if you're going to ask them to move out. And I think it depends on the state. Okay, Gary, we're on number 10.
Yep.
One thing I did, which we did right from the beginning, is we learned about charging extra for various things. This goes in apartments, like you would be charged extra for laundry facilities, extra for other things that aren't attached to the unit or something. One thing we did right up front was we charge a relatively high pet deposit and pet rent. We charge between 25 and 35 for each animal. We had a limit of 2 animals, 25 pounds or less. And we put in there, no pet sitting, no pet services, no just visiting. And we actually said that in there, no just visiting pets. And if they're there for more than 20 hours, then they have to pay. And you need to have a similar guest policy. Most states will allow you to have 2 people per room, sometimes more. 4-bedroom house, 8 people, maybe 10. It depends on your state. You need to spell that out in advance. Another thing we learned, which we did right, was we looked at the property tax bill. In the desert, apparently because people weren't paying, they put the trash in the property tax. So the tenants did not get a trash bill. It was actually on the property tax bill, and so was the sewer charges. So that meant that most landlords out there were paying for the tenant's trash bill. Well, we say right on the lease, tenant is responsible for water, gas, electricity, trash, internet, phone, etc. And then after they've, you advertise the lease for, let's say, $1,500 a month. You send them the lease papers and you say it's $1,500, trash is $25, sewer is $24, or whatever it is. And if they say, hey, well, what is this trash and sewer? So, well, we said you have to pay for all your utilities. That's paid for up front. Now you have to pay for it by the month. You could actually end up losing a little money because if they're not there the full year, then they won't pay the full amount, so you can add a couple dollars onto that. But the point is that most people don't even think of that. I would, along the lines of what I said earlier about getting better tenants, always start with a higher rent. This is something we didn't do. We wanted more applications, so we went with a lower rent. We should have done just the opposite. We should have done with a higher rent to try and get better tenants. There is one caveat to that I heard on Bigger Pockets. Sometimes if a tenant is so bad they can't get anything, they will apply for everything and only end up with the most expensive units. So that is important to check their background. Maybe they're good liars, or like Gary said, they're some kind of a professional. They have no intention of paying the rent in the first place, so they don't care about a high rent, and right off the bat that they don't pay. Fortunately, that never happened to us, but we heard some horror stories on Bigger Pockets about that. So make sure you do really good screening. I had already mentioned that the tenants are responsible for small repairs, but we make a very big deal out of water damage. Water damage seems like it can be as bad or worse than fire. It causes mold and just a drywall damage, just an incredible amount of damage. So make sure that you have a firm water damage policy that says that they pay for it if it's their fault, especially if it's a slow leak. We already mentioned the no smoking policy. We have some tenants that it's legal to smoke marijuana, but we say not in the house. We don't want that smell in the house. Okay, now we finally get down to the crux of this whole decision, and that is, why are we cashing out? There has to be some time when we're going to do that, unless you leave it to your kids. But we feel like now is the time to cash out. We're kind of in a bubble, aren't we? So we're coming up on a correction. We think we're kind of tired of driving out to the desert in the first place and being long distance landlords. We figure if this is not the right time, then we can just buy more rental houses next year. You have to consider, this is something that Gary mentioned, cash flow now versus cash flow later. How do you want to receive your payment? Do you want to do a 1031 exchange? Gary, I think I'm losing my voice. You might need to
Okay.
You might need to take over.
Okay. All right. Chris had put a statement out on our or a request out on the workplace a few weeks ago, and what they're looking at doing is selling some of their properties. And part of the question was, what's the best way to sell it? Should, EXP let you, I think, buy or sell up to 3 investment properties in a year, and they waive any of the splits, and also your own personal home you live in too, by the way. I think it's both, Chris. We should probably verify if it has to do with just selling or just buying. I think it goes both ways, from what I remember. But so when Chris and Tricia are looking at your situation, it may be better for Tricia to do the listing, in this case for properties over the 3 you're allowed, to take the commissions, because it's going to help her basically record her balance on Social Security. There's also other factors. In other words, when it comes to capital gains, right now we know what capital gains are. We know what the tax rates are. However, they could change after the election. They could easily change in next year, January, February, March. You could see them change by April. We don't know that, but we know what they are right now. So what you do is you generally run your numbers based on what the capital gains are now, and any other taxes. So if you're in California, you've got taxes to pay. Some states, every state can be different. Some states are more owner friendly. California is a very, very tough on owners. But in any case, long story short, you want to do what I call a decision matrix. So I'm going to get back to Chris's chart here in a second. But let me just do this up here. We'll call this decision matrix, excuse me. And what you do is the columns are your choices. In other words, let's say one choice is sell, all 5. I know you got more than that, but I think you were looking to sell possibly 5. Maybe you want to sell 3. Maybe you want to sell 1 now and defer. Let's do a plus sign and defer the others, or some other option. Let's say sell 2 plus defer 1. And what I mean by that is defer one of the sales till the new year. By the way, quick caveat here: whether you're selling 5, 3, or 2, or 1, whatever, there's creative ways to, just like there's creative ways to purchase. So if most of you have the Massive Passive Cash Flow book, which was the 6th book, usually I'll give out that link for free. But in there's a chapter on creative purchasing techniques where you can turn that to use it for selling exit strategies too. So one of those things you can do is, let's say you decide to sell 3, you get them all into contract and you close by the end of the year here. You can defer part of your gains till the next year. You can structure the deal so that the buyer doesn't give you all the down payment till sometime after January 1. You could have it on January 1 or January 2, which then puts those gains into the next year. See what I'm saying? You can sell the properties and defer part of it. You can do partial owner financing, where you take whatever you want right now just to build up your capital reserves and get out from under the property, so you're no longer managing the property and getting all the gray hair. And you can say you'll do a 3-year balloon, so that in 3 years, whoever bought it from you has to get a new mortgage on it and pay you off. And in the meantime, you're earning like a monthly income like you do on an annuity. So, for example, let's say you had 5 properties. You could literally sell all 5 today, right, and defer a portion of your gains by doing owner financing on 4 of them. One of them would be have a balloon next year. One would be the year after. One the year after that, and 1 year after that. So you could do a balloon where you defer your them getting a new mortgage to pay the rest of you off, 1 per year for the next 4 years, right? So now you've essentially got rid of them now, received the benefit of selling now as far as no more headaches, and deferred some of the gains till future years. You can also do things like a lease option. You can sell 1 out right now and then sell the others on an option, which means they pay for the option to purchase the property at a future date. They take possession and give you a monthly rent, and then they can sublet it out to whoever they want to sublet it out to. So you can do like a master lease, take an option fee now, get some money coming in now, and do a lease for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. In any case, down here on the left, guys, these are the left-hand column. The rows are your variables. So the variable is going to be time. How do these decisions?
Yeah.
What's that?
We don't see your screen.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Okay, hang on 1 second. There you go. So time, income, expense. Okay, let's just call it capital gain. Family. How do these decisions affect your family? There's things like that. And in each cell, like selling all 5 right now, how does it affect your time? There's going to be either a negative impact or a positive impact. Okay. I don't know what I just did there. Let me do a Control Z. Where there's plus sign, and it's either going to be negative or positive, and you put a number in there. Like this is going to have a positive impact on your time to a factor of 7. The factor is 1 through 10. 1 is little impact, 10 is a lot of impact. Okay, so selling all 5 means you're going to free up more of your time long term now, as opposed to just selling 3 or selling just 1. You'll have a lesser impact just selling 1 right now, but you got continued headaches and you got to deal with these things for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. So each cell has a positive or negative impact to a degree of 1 to 10. You just write all the variables down here. There could be other things like travel. Maybe traveling to you is very important. So if you sold all 5 now, that's a very positive impact. you could probably do a lot of traveling now as a result. But if you only sold one, that would maybe be a positive impact, but only to a degree of 2 or 3, which means you maybe not be able to travel as much as you want. So in any case, you fill all these in. At the bottom is your total. When you add up the totals, positives and negatives, and whichever one has the highest values is the most likely or logical choice. You might take some different choice, but at least it gives you logic and rationale behind an emotional decision. So, and I guess let me take the questions here because they came in pretty fast, and I'll go back to Chris's document. Okay, let's see. Okay, can't see. We want to see your calculations. What about risk of losing equity? Excellent one. That was David Edwards. So you could add a category here, add another cell, excuse me. Insert columns, let's insert row, excuse me, below. So down here you could say property value. In other words, if you sold all 5 now, you stand a good chance of cashing out at the peak of the market. If you just sold 3 now and didn't sell the others till later years, the values of those properties could drop. And I'm not a pessimist, I'm an optimist, but I do believe we're headed for a correction. And I guess I'll go on record because this is being recorded right now. I think we're going to start seeing a correction, guys, starting here in the next 30 to 60 days. Just early indicators. I'm not saying panic or anything like that. The full run of it might not hit till next year, probably to be the case. But right now, I'm pretty sure we're starting to see the early signs of a little bit of a pullback on the demand side, just starting to happen. So just based on 5 recessions, it's just what I'm seeing. So, so Chris, what we may be able to do is maybe on another call, we could take one of the properties. Let's say you sold 3, so you get past the EXP exclusion for 3 investment properties, and you sell your 4th one. We could look at it and bring up all the variables, like Trisha listing it versus you listing it. Do you sell the one in California to sell one in Idaho? We could make all those to choices and put in the variables here and plug in some actual numbers, like what could we actually sell it for? What are they being rented for? What income would we lose by selling? What does it do to our tax burden? All those things, we could do that, because that would be an excellent exercise for everyone, you know?
Yes, and it's a very scary decision for us, by the way. This has been our only source of income since 2016. And we've been realtors now for a little less than 2 years. And so we're only just now ramping up on that. Our income as a real estate agents come close to the income that we were getting off of our rental properties. Yeah. So now we're selling them off, and we're faced with pretty much no income except for the profit that we made off of the rentals, which you can't live off of forever.
Right.
Real estate.
And of course, that gives us incentive, though, to sell more houses.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it probably give you a lot of peace of mind, that's for sure. So in any case, back here, I think we'll be able to pull this off before we're done. 1031 exchange, without going a lot of, we can do an entire session just on that. But essentially what you're doing is you identify your sale as an exchange sale, right? Which means in 45 days, you got to identify the next purchase. Now, there's no limit. There's different ways you can do a 1031 exchange, but one of the ways you can do it is you can identify 20 properties. You may only have to buy 1, but you at least got to identify the one you're going to buy in the group of 20. That's one way of doing it. And then in 180 days, you got to actually close on the next one. And what you're doing is you're rolling in the gains from the property you sold into the next property. So it's not like you eliminate the tax, you just basically defer it. Okay. So that's the bottom line, or 101 on 1031 exchange. But again, you could sell this one, take the money, and go do a flip. You start flipping. You could start a residential assisted living business. You can all kinds of extra strategies. You don't have to do a straight rental. You can do Airbnb and all kinds of things. Chris mentions owner financing. That's one of the things we just talked about a moment ago is you can be the bank. And one of I call him my uncle. He's one of my mother's best friend's husband down in Magnolia, Texas. He's in his 80s. He's had a lifetime of building up ownership in properties, mainly single family homes. And now he's selling them for 10% down, and he's the bank. He's holding the note for the remainder. So it's like an annuity for him. And then he said in most cases, people will refinance or sell within 10 years, and he gets the rest of his money then. And Texas is very owner friendly, so if he has to foreclose, it's much easier in Texas than say New York or California. But excellent strategy, particularly if you're in your second half of life and you're looking at bringing in cash flow without all the headaches. You get a monthly payment. If they don't pay, you can foreclose based on the tax laws. Sell it and pay the taxes. Believe it or not, guys, I'm pretty conservative. I try to structure my stuff where I technically live in Florida, but my businesses are headquartered out of Wyoming, so I don't pay either personal or state tax because Wyoming has no state business tax. Florida has no state income tax, personal income tax. So what I like to do though, when it comes to federal taxes, I actually prefer to pay them at the time they're due, just to get rid of it. I also know that things can happen down the road with tax law. It happened in 1986, and it could happen again. So you can lose certain benefits if they change the tax code on us. So instead of delaying taxes to some future date that I don't know, I may be worth more money then, all kinds of factors, and I believe that I will. I prefer to pay my taxes now. It's just a personal thing with me. So look for the bubble and coming correction. I would say my personal opinion is if anybody's here looking to sell, you might want to consider selling sooner than later. And then if you want to redeploy your assets, when you believe we're at the bottom, you'll know we're at the bottom because it's like it levels off, right? And start buying them. There's no guarantee, but history repeats itself. In fact, that's one of the strategies we've used. And back in the last recession, it was actually based on necessity. I had to sell properties based on something, a divorce case judge said, sell assets to raise capital for the soon-to-be ex-Mrs. Wilson. And I had broken my back, all kinds of things going on. But what it did is it raised cash, and then we used that money to do other things like build other businesses, So let's see here. Look for bubble coming correction. Okay, commissions, real estate agent. Higher commission versus higher capital gain. You on any tax return, even if you're completely self-employed independent, like most of us here, we're independent contractors and some of us have properties. So we have passive income from rentals, and we have earned income from our license. Now, the reason you want to have some earned income is so that you can, pay into Social Security and things like that. And if you don't do that, you run the risk of an audit, okay? I'm going to give you a suggestion. I'm not a tax attorney or a tax accountant, but when you own businesses and you have an intellectual property that you offer and you sell like I do, you can have the company pay you a royalty. It's for intellectual property, the use of your name, the use of your image, your face, and of course the intellectual property itself. You can get paid a royalty. Or a royalty, guess what, is also in this sort of same category as passive income. In other words, you don't pay Social Security tax on the royalty, just like you don't pay it on the benefit of having rental income is you pay income tax, but you don't pay the FICA tax. Same thing with the royalty. So, but I always pay myself something so that I show something on the books, and when I go get a loan, I've got multiple sources of income. Okay, that's why I do it. Okay, we got a question. I knew that was going to raise a question. Let's see what we got here. So does the royalty versus a dividend? David, beyond all I know, it's categorized as a royalty, not a dividend. I do believe the two to be very similar. But on a dividend, that's something you want to talk to your tax accountant about. Dividend is more related to the profit of the company. I'm not saying a royalty is, a royalty is payment for service, where a dividend implies profit. Okay, so two different categories. That's what I'm talking about. So dividend, yeah, dividend has no FICA. So there are similar in certain regards. That's exactly right. Any case, let's go back here to Chris's. Okay. Now, EXP allows up to 3 sales for your 100% commission. Yeah, we do that on the team too, guys. If you buy or sell your own home, not only does EXP not charge you commission, and most brokerages, some of you may be with KW and Remax, most brokerages let you go with your own property, but I'm pretty sure EXP is one of the few, or if only the one, that recognizes up to 3 investment properties. I just don't know if it's both selling and buying. I think, Chris, I think we looked at that. I think they do this. If you're going to be if you're also the buyer's agent and the listing agent, I think they'll give you the listing side, but not the buyer side. I think that's how do you remember, Chris? We looked at that several months ago.
I did read it, and they said you can do 3. What is unclear is if I can do 3 and if Tricia can do 3. When I went into the California broker room in EXP, the broker there said, "No, I don't think you can do that." And I said, "Well, we're not a team together. We're completely independent." And she said, "Well, she'd have to research that." So that's kind of a gray area that we're not sure about. This whole thing started, by the way, with that question number 1. Should we pay Tricia 10% commission, or should we pay a 1% commission? That's the question. Which comes out better in the long run for our taxes and for Social Security?
Well, you definitely will. Remember, Social Security, the way the tax comes out of your income, there is a ceiling. So if you earn more than, I don't know what it is now, maybe $250,000 a year as a married couple, you won't pay Social Security beyond the $150,000 mark. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a ceiling. Yeah. So you want to make sure you're below that ceiling if you're going to increase Trish's commission. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So keep that in mind. That's something that's fixed. So you can actually Google that online and see what that maximum is as far as what they take out of your income. Now, capital gain, I'm pretty sure once you've owned the property more than a year, that's a flat. It is what it is. It's just a percentage. Capital gains tax is generally going to be less than income tax. Income tax is always in brackets. It's a progressive table. So the more income you make, progressively, the more tax you pay on that increased income. In other words, it's your income that's below 30,000, you won't pay anything, hardly at all. 30,000 to 45,000, you'll pay 15%. 45,000 to 80,000, you'll pay 20%. I'm just throwing these numbers out here. What I'm getting at is if you make $300,000 a year, yeah, you might be in a 39% bracket, but not all 300,000 is taxed at 39%. Only the top portion is taxed at 39%. Okay, so you want to make sure whatever you're doing income-wise, you see what bracket you're going into and look at the increase in tax in that bracket. All right, and then what you do is you add all that up. You compare it to had you done the capital gains route, and you just simply do a comparison. We got a lot of questions here. I know some of them. Tom Silvestri, if you're on the board here still, chime in because I know you used to do some of this work. Okay, let's see. Dividends and FICA. Yes, it is. Yes, 3 each. So David says it's 3 each if you're independent, Chris. Okay. Good. Yep. David says, I have a great tax guy that would be more than happy to come on a GIA with. Hey, David, let's do that because I was going to ask my guy, Jerry Irby. I asked his receptionist and hadn't heard back. He's getting up there. His son's taking over. He's getting ready to retire. So if you want to bring your guy in, let's put him on one of the webinars. Yep. All right. So Tom says, thanks, Tom, for chiming in. 2020 FICA stops at 132.9. So Chris, above 132.9, any income you add is not going to help your Social Security costs. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Good.
Thanks.
Yep. So we should do a decision matrix on that, Chris, and put all these variables in there. Put the choices up and do what ifs, just one at a time, one column at a time, and then you'll come up with a mathematical answer, you know?
And I looked it up online. Capital gains tops out at 20%.
Yeah.
Which is almost always better than income tax.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously our hope is that'll stay that way after the election. We'll see. All this stuff, all the stimulus packages, I don't care who gets in the office, it's got to be paid for eventually. And we provide the tax dollars. So something, the money's got to come from somewhere, you know, and hopefully they won't mess with capital gains. So let's see, I think we're almost done here. Conclusion, do it now. You don't need the money to sell to investors. You must be one. Yeah, I love that philosophy. And what's funny is David mentioned this the other day. We're talking about doing the investor groups around the country. And some agents are new to investing, or maybe they've only flipped a home. And he's absolutely right. The best way to learn is to be in a position where you're actually teaching and helping others. So one of my favorite old time students, Kelly O'Keefe, she's not on the team, but she's never invested. She's never even bought her own house. And she's been working with investors as long as I've known her. And she does wholesaling. She has a team. She's done workshops. So it just goes to show you don't necessarily have to own properties right now, but in your heart, you need to want to be an investor and be willing to learn and help others invest. It's like Zig Ziglar said, help others get what they want. You'll get plenty of what you want. And if it's investing, help others invest. Now you're in the game of investing. You're earning money. You're learning while you're doing it. And guys, you'll learn way more from being in the field. You know, I had a title company, and I'm not an attorney, and I took the title exam for the state and passed it the first time. And it wasn't because I was a genius or went to school. It's because I did thousands of transactions, right? And I saw everything you could imagine. And I was in a room with a bunch of lawyers. All the lawyers were taking the exam. I'm sorry, this was a continuing education thing about a year later at a conference. And they kept calling me the guy in the green shirt because I kept using my hand. I had the answers. But it was because I was in the game working with other investors all those years. I had some experience. I got a lot more experience working with investors. That big deal where we built a mutual fund and bought portfolios of properties and managed them and sold some and all that. That all came about because I kept working with investors, and somebody made an introduction to a Wall Street guy, and he said, I want to buy a bunch of properties. We're going to do a Wall Street style, and I want you to be the broker. And of course I said yes. And he taught me everything he knew about setting up a mutual fund. I was in meetings with attorneys it was an amazing experience. But all that happened because I decided to say yes to opportunity, like building these investor groups. That keep telling people, it's not just about the commissions. You're going to make connections, networking. People will call you to be part of your group. Lenders, attorneys. It's just an amazing experience. And I hope every one of you is going to do that project with me. In any case, let's see here. Anything else, guys, before we wrap this one up? This was a great one. Everybody, if you could give Chris a pat on the back and his wife Tricia. This has been a really fun night, and it just goes, having real life experiences like this teaches you way more than just reading a book. So how about a chat box thank you to Chris and each one of you participating too and asking questions.
Thanks. I would add that although I'm kicking myself for some of the mistakes I made, you pay for your education one way or another. You go to college, it's very expensive. So we learned some expensive lessons, but the bottom line is 7 rental houses paid our bills for 5 years. And we were able to do just about whatever we wanted to do with that cash flow. And we did the BRRRR strategy to pay 5 of them off. So when it came all down to the wire at the final end year, we only have 3 mortgages, our house and 2 of the rentals. And just about 3 weeks ago, we got a heck of a deal on a HELOC from one of my credit unions, and we paid off the final 2 rental houses. And the combined HELOC was substantially cheaper than the payment on those rental houses. So we own all 7 at this point, free and clear. So it's going to be 100% profit from this point on. So rental houses were a very good thing for us to get into.
Yeah. It's amazing. If you do that program that Shannon was showing us, you can pay those things off a lot faster than you would think, you know? I mean, Chris, you're living proof, you know?
Yeah.
You pay those things off much faster, and you're doing the right thing right now. I believe selling right now, if selling is your intention in the next year or two or three, probably is a pretty darn good idea. Yeah. So, Chris, you're getting a lot of great comments. I don't know if you can see them, Chris, in the chat
Yeah, I
box.
see him. Yeah, thank you. By the way, after I got laid off in 2016, Tricia found a house, and God really led us to it. It's just amazing. It was our cheapest house, and that put us over the top. We would have had negative cash flow of about 500 a month at that point with 6 rental houses. That final rental house put us over the top to a good, substantial, positive cash flow. And it was super risky to buy it after I got laid off. We were thinking, we're going to need this money. I got, I think, 8 weeks of pay when they laid me off, plus my unemployment. So we used all of that money to buy our final rental house. So we were willing to put everything on the line at that point, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I'll wrap it up with this. That probably is one of the greatest lessons in life is this. And I'm not suggesting people, you know, sail your ship to another shore and burn the ship. But I'm telling you, some of the greatest successes where when you take that risk, and it's an informed, educated move, by the way, and position yourself for successes. Like when you have to succeed, you will. You know, you don't have there's no plan B, and you know, and I'm living proof to that. I mean, I've had situations where I didn't have a choice. And the funny thing is generally speaking, you rise to the occasion. Think about it. If you have a child and that child's riding their bicycle down a driveway and you see cars coming the other way, you'll summon the speed of Superman to get there in time to save your child. Well, if you can act in moments of crisis and summon that strength to do what you need to do, why not live that way every day? I'm not saying living in crisis mode. I mean, you know you have the ability to respond when required. Live each day with that type of energy, and that's really what I'm getting to here. You know, I built businesses before where I had no reason to even, you know, like I didn't have to do it, but I wanted to get to the next level. And what I would do is position myself where it had to succeed, or it would be painful, and I would, you know, lose, right? Declare bankruptcy, stuff like that. And I came close a couple times. The funny thing is you actually get better at it, you know. And I know some of you think this sounds like crazy talk, but I'm telling you, you know, look at some of the successes in the world today, and you'll see people made big moves and took a lot of action. Okay. Now, having said that, this is one of those things. You know, don't try this at home unless you're ready for it. Okay, be prepared. You know, some of these things I didn't do too much later in life. I didn't early. I was way more conservative. I would never do these things when I had young children around. It was, I had the day job, had the 401k, the whole 9 yards. But when they got older and I realized I made more money on my investments, I was managing, I think, 4 flips at the same time, and I already had cash flow for my rentals that exceeded my bank income. And that's when I finally made the move. So I was in a safe position to do that. But from that point forward, what I'm getting at is I took bigger risk and put more on the line. And I got some scars to show for it, but I'm also completely free right now. I wouldn't be this way if I hadn't taken those big moves. That's what Chris was saying. I admire you, Chris, for doing that. That was a gutsy call, but I tell you what, that sounds like that was the property that put you over the line for you and Tricia to be able to live a decent life, you know?
Yeah, and I was glad that Tricia was not only on board with it, but the one that suggested it in the first place. So if she had come up with it, it must be a good idea.
Hey, well, Trish, put your face in the camera here for a second. Let everybody see you. Yeah, look at that big smile, guys. See that?
Yeah, it was a journey, but the last house was it was kind of a no-brainer. It was a house that was right next to a park. So no neighbors on one side, no neighbors behind. It was being sold by a real estate agent, but she was selling it. This is up in Idaho with, it was the middle of a really bad winter, so it was all kind of snowed in. So we went out, stepped out on a lot of faith, but you know, it was a great purchase.
And we did nothing to that house except clean it.
Yeah.
Wow. You want to hear something funny, guys? I just thought about this. Here we are, Chris and Tricia, we're going through this life story of yours going back to, you know, essentially 12, probably 13, 14 years ago to now. We probably scared the dickens out of some people about should they actually buy rentals. But here we are at the end, we wrapped it up with a nice positive, hey guys, I bought that last one and that was the one that got us through. So now people are thinking, well, maybe I should buy rentals.
So we're talking to a lot of realtors right now. So the best thing that all three of us, Gary and Chris and myself, would say is get your money ready. If you haven't dipped your foot in the rental, you know, properties yet, get your money ready because this correction is coming, and so you'll be ready when things drop. So that's the word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be prepared. Famous Boy Scout motto, be prepared. And we used to call it Christmas time. You know, we back in 2008, 9, 10, to us, it was Christmas time, you know. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, yep. Well, listen, you guys, I appreciate you doing this. This was a big help. I think it just helped a lot of people, and everybody listening and chiming in with your comments and questions. Thank you for that too. By the way, I am going to be on vacation next week with my family. It'll be limited Wi-Fi and cell phone, but I've been there before, and I know go to the top floor. I can get reception, so you won't see any time slots available for scheduling. But if anybody here needs something next week, you can still reach me. Just call me, text me, or email me, and I'll be checking in the mornings and the evenings, and I can keep up. Anything more urgent, just send a text, and I'll get off the beach and call you. I'd rather help you save a deal than potentially lose one. So in any case, other than that, though, I'll see you the following week. Now, we are going to do the webinar next week. It's going to be, forget what day that is, next Wednesday. Yeah, next Wednesday, we'll still do a webinar, still do that one on Wednesday night. And we'll see you then. In the meantime, you guys take care of yourselves.
Enjoy that vacation. It's well-deserved.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. I've never had a vacation where like a traditional sense. I always just keep going, but I just have fun every day. And I'm up here in the mountains now. I couldn't imagine life being any better. So I'm grateful for what I do. It's like living my dream, you know. Thank goodness I like it, right? So.
Right.
Okay, guys. Everybody take care of yourselves. God bless you, and I'll see you next Wednesday night. If you haven't had a one-on-one, so Cedra, Carrie, boy, just call me, email me, text me, whatever. It's been a while since I've heard Doug, same thing. Let's see, everybody else I've met with here recently. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, so everybody I met with, Cedra, Doug, and Carrie. That would be awesome. Okay, guys, I'm going to get going and have some cobbler, and I will see you next week.
Oh, can you say some of that through the screen, please?
Yeah, I got a horrible sweet tooth that developed in my 40s, and I can't get rid of it. So, yeah. Okay, I'll see you guys next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.